Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Welcome once again to a quiet corner of Middle-earth, where dreams are spun from moonlight and tales drift on the evening breeze. Tonight, we shall step softly into a story whispered through the ages, one of wisdom, peril, and the ever-watchful eyes of fate. Our tale unfolds with Gandalf the Grey, wise and weathered, standing upon the edge of discovery. A glimpse into the unknown, seen through an ancient seeing stone, the Palantír. Tonight, we follow Gandalf the Grey, the wandering wizard whose wisdom has shaped the fates of many. Though often seen as a gentle counselor, there were times when the weight of his knowledge pressed heavy upon his heart. This tale unfolds during such a time when whispers of shadow stirred in the east and old alliances trembled like leaves in an autumn breeze. It begins in the fair land of Rohan, where golden fields ripple under the moon's silver touch. Here, Gandalf rests for but a moment, his mind troubled by news carried on swift winds. Strange happenings in the wild, rumors of dark riders, and the faint echo of an ancient name, Sauron. But it is not mere rumor that drives Gandalf forward. It is something more, something seen but not yet understood. For in the high tower of Orthanc, under the careful watch of Saruman the White, lies a relic of ancient days, the Palantír, a seeing stone clear as still water, yet deep as the night sky. Gandalf knows the power of such an object and the danger it holds. Through it, one might glimpse distant lands, hidden paths, and, if fate is cruel, the eye of the Dark Lord himself. Yet knowledge is a double-edged sword, and Gandalf must tread carefully. So, my dear friends, if the day has left you weary and your heart seeks peace, rest now. Let the sound of my voice and the gentle rhythm of the tale carry you away. And if your eyes grow heavy before the story's end, worry not. The tale will wait for you like an old friend by the fireside. In the heart of Middle-earth, where rolling hills meet ancient forests and rivers hum softly in the moonlight, there stands a figure of quiet strength and deep wisdom. Gandalf the Grey, clad in a weathered cloak of ash and storm cloud, walks slowly along an old woodland path. His staff, worn smooth by countless journeys, taps gently against the earth, keeping time with his thoughtful steps. The air is crisp but calm, the remnants of daylight fading into twilight's gentle embrace. Birds, their songs now softer, flutter toward their nests, while fireflies flicker like tiny lanterns among the tall grass. The world seems at peace, yet Gandalf's eyes, sharp beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, hold a quiet worry. For many in Middle-earth, Gandalf is a welcome sight, a bringer of stories, fireworks, and sage counsel. Hobbits, in particular, know him as the merry wizard who lights up the sky above the Shire during midsummer festivals. Yet behind the twinkle in his eye lies the burden of foresight, for Gandalf is no mere conjurer of cheap tricks. He is a Maya, an ancient spirit clothed in mortal form, sent to guide and guard the free peoples against the ever-looming shadow. Tonight, however, there are no festivities, no joyful gatherings, only the hush of twilight and the distant rustle of leaves. Gandalf has traveled far, from the quiet lanes of the Shire to the windswept plains of Rohan, and now his path bends toward Isengard, toward Saruman, the White Wizard, once the head of the Order of Istari. It was not the wind alone that carried Gandalf to this place, but whispers, whispers of unrest. Dark shapes had been seen moving beyond the misty mountains. Strange lights flickered in the depths of Mirkwood, and the name Dol Guldur, once thought abandoned, had surfaced again in hushed conversations. These signs, faint yet persistent, painted a picture that Gandalf could not ignore. But more pressing still was the matter of the Palantíri, the seeing stones of old. Ancient relics of Númenor, they were once tools of great wisdom, allowing communication across vast distances. Yet, like many powerful artifacts, they held peril as well. If one were to fall under the influence of a darker will, it could become a window into shadow itself. And Gandalf suspected, with the weight of certainty settling upon his heart, that Saruman had such a stone within Orthanc. It was this suspicion, more than any rumor or fleeting shadow, that drew him onward. For if the Palantír was being used, and if Sauron's gaze could pierce it, then even the White Council's strongest defenses might falter. The night deepens as Gandalf pauses at the crest of a hill. The lights of Isengard faint in the distance. He takes a slow breath, steadying himself, knowing the path ahead is one of both wisdom and peril. His heart, though burdened, remains resolute, for in Middle-earth, even the smallest glimmer of light can hold back the greatest shadow. "Come," Gandalf murmurs to himself, adjusting his cloak. The hour grows late, and the road waits for no one. And so, the journey begins, not just for Gandalf, but for Middle-earth itself, as fate turns quietly beneath the stars. The soft crunch of earth beneath Gandalf's boots was the only sound as he made his way down the hillside. The stars above shimmered like ancient jewels, their light gentle yet watchful, as though the sky itself observed his quiet pilgrimage. He moved with the measured pace of one accustomed to long roads and deeper thoughts. The path toward Isengard was well worn, winding through thickets of pine and birch, where the moonlight filtered down in silvery beams. Gandalf's staff tapped softly against the ground, not merely for support, but as a quiet reminder of the strength he carried within. He was alone, yet never truly solitary, for the very earth beneath his feet seemed to murmur ancient tales, and the wind, cool and thoughtful, carried whispers from distant lands. As he moved through the woods, memories flickered in his mind. Images of council meetings in Rivendell, the laughter of hobbits in the Shire, the solemn gaze of Elrond as they last spoke. It was Elrond, after all, who had shared the first whispers of concern. Strange sightings near the Gladden Fields, the very place where Isildur had fallen long ago, the one ring slipping from his grasp into the cold embrace of the river. Gandalf paused by an ancient oak, its bark gnarled and weathered by countless seasons. He leaned against it, eyes narrowing as he recalled Elrond's words. "There are shadows moving where none should dwell. It may be nothing, but I fear the old evil stirs once more." It was not like Gandalf to dismiss such concerns. He had spent centuries watching, guiding, and, when needed, intervening. He had wandered through the ruins of Arnor, stood upon the battlements of Midde-earth, and walked the sealant paths of Lothlorien under moonlight. Yet, this time, the signs were scattered, like leaves before an unseen storm. He continued onward, the woods gradually giving way to the gentle slopes of Non-Curunir, the valley of Saruman. From afar, Orthanc rose like a silent sentinel, its dark stone glinting faintly in the moon's pale glow. The tower, built by the Númenóreans of old, stood unyielding and proud, its polished surface reflecting no warmth, only the cold clarity of ancient craft. Gandalf's thoughts drifted to Saruman, the White Wizard. Once the leader of the Istari, Saruman had been wise beyond measure, his counsel valued by elves and men alike. Yet, in recent years, there had been a subtle shift in his demeanor, an impatience, a hunger for knowledge that bordered on obsession. He spoke often of the rings of power, of the need to study the enemy's devices to better understand them. But knowledge, Gandalf knew, was a double-edged sword. To gaze too long into the abyss was to risk being drawn into it. And the Palantíri, they were dangerous conduits, capable of both enlightenment and corruption. As Gandalf drew nearer to Isengard, the air seemed to change, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The night, once cool and refreshing, grew still, as though holding its breath. The wind died down, and even the rustling leaves fell silent. It was an unnatural quiet, the kind that precedes a storm. He paused at the edge of a narrow brook, the water glimmering faintly under starlight. Kneeling, he dipped his hand into the cool stream, letting the water run through his fingers. It was clear, pure, untouched by shadow. Yet, as he looked up toward Orthanc, he felt the weight of unease settle deeper in his chest. A sudden flutter of wings broke the silence. A lone bird, a night thrush, took flight from a nearby tree, its feathers catching the moonlight as it disappeared into the night. Gandalf watched it go, his brow furrowing. Birds do not flee without cause. Rising, he adjusted his cloak and pressed onward. The road to Isengard was not long, but it felt stretched by the weight of unseen eyes. Shadows clung to the edges of the path, and though no threat revealed itself, the very air seemed to hum with restrained tension. At last, he reached the outer ring of Isengard, a vast circle of stone encircling the tower. The once green valley had changed. Trees that had stood for centuries were gone, replaced by barren earth and strange devices. Smoke curled faintly from vents in the ground, and the gentle murmurs of nature had been replaced by an eerie stillness. Gandalf stood quietly, his staff planted firmly beside him. The gates of Isengard loomed ahead, dark and unwelcoming. Yet, as he approached, they swung open without a sound, as though expecting him. Saruman's voice, smooth as polished glass, echoed from within. "Welcome, Gandalf the Grey. I had wondered when you might arrive." Gandalf's grip on his staff tightened. The journey had led him here, to this threshold where light and shadow danced uneasily. He stepped forward, heart steady but mind alert, knowing that the true path of discovery lay just beyond the gates, within the tower, where wisdom and betrayal now shared the same hollow halls. And so, the mystery deepened, each step drawing him closer to truths that would shape the fate of Middle-earth itself. The heavy doors of Orthanc closed behind Gandalf with a low, resonant thud. The sound echoed through the stone halls, fading into an eerie silence. Within the tower, the air was cool and still, carrying a faint scent of aged parchment, cold iron, and something subtler, an almost metallic tang that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. Saruman led the way, his white robes flowing soundlessly as he moved across the polished stone floor. The tower's interior had changed since Gandalf's last visit. The once open halls, where light streamed through high windows and banners of many colors hung, were now stark and austere. Tapestries of historical lore were gone, replaced by intricate maps and cryptic diagrams etched into the walls. "You have traveled far, my friend," Saruman said without turning. His voice was measured, like water flowing smoothly over stone. "And no doubt you bring tidings from the wildlands, the Shire, perhaps, or news from Rivendell." Gandalf's gaze swept the room, noting the small but significant changes. A collection of scrolls bound in black leather, strange crystals set upon shelves, and a large table at the center of the chamber, its surface covered with aged maps. "I bring concern, Saruman," Gandalf replied evenly, gripping his staff a little tighter. "The roads grow restless, shadows move where none should, and whispers of old evils stir among the free folk. I had hoped your counsel might shed light upon these troubles." Saruman paused beside the central table, fingers tracing the edge of an ancient map that showed the lands east of the Misty Mountains, Rovanion, Mirkwood, and the desolate lands beyond. He smiled faintly, though the expression never reached his eyes. "Troubles," he mused. "Yes, the world shifts, but change is the nature of all things, Gandalf. Even the strongest walls must crumble with time." There was an undertone to his words, a subtle edge that set Gandalf's mind on alert. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Time may wear down stone, but wisdom should guard against folly. There is rumor of a dark power growing in the ruins of Dol Guldur. Some say the necromancer's shadow has lengthened, touching even the borders of Lothlorien. What say you of this, Saruman? Surely your sight reaches farther than mine." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Saruman chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Dol Guldur," he said, almost dismissively. "Old tales, Gandalf, shadows upon shadows. The necromancer is but a name, a phantom conjured by fearful minds. No true power dwells there. I have watched, and I have seen nothing of substance." But Gandalf's sharp eyes caught the flicker of something, an instant's hesitation, a guarded look that passed across Saruman's face like a fleeting shadow. Doubt crept into Gandalf's mind, weaving itself into his thoughts like a thread of dark silk. "Nothing of substance," Gandalf echoed, voice quiet but firm. "And yet the land withers, the trees sicken, and the air grows thick with dread. Even the elves grow uneasy, and their senses are not easily deceived." Saruman's smile faded, He turned, hands clasped behind his back, as he paced toward a tall, narrow window overlooking the barren valley below. "Fear breeds folly," he said at last, his tone colder now. "The elves cling to old songs and fading dreams. Their time wanes, Gandalf. They see threats in every shadow because they fear the passing of their own age." The sun, rising slowly over the distant mountains, cast long beams of light through the window. The golden rays touched the edges of the room, but seemed to falter against the dark stone of the tower, as though even sunlight hesitated to linger here. Gandalf stepped closer, his staff tapping softly against the floor. "You speak of fading ages, Saruman, yet even in the twilight of the elves, wisdom has not abandoned them. I ask again, not as a challenge, but as a friend, what have you seen?" For a moment, Saruman stood motionless, his face turned toward the light. Then, without warning, he gestured toward the far end of the chamber, where a tall, veiled pedestal stood in shadow. "Come," he said, voice smooth once more. "If it is sight you seek, let me show you something few have gazed upon and lived to speak of." Gandalf hesitated. The pedestal had not been there on his previous visits. It was draped in fine black silk, embroidered with silver runes that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The air around it seemed heavier, as though the very space held its breath. Saruman swept aside the cloth with a flourish, revealing a smooth, dark sphere resting within an ornate cradle of iron. A Palantír, the seeing stone of old Númenor. Gandalf's breath caught. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on the orb. The Palantíri were ancient artifacts, crafted by the Eldar to aid communication across vast distances. Few remained in Middle-earth, and fewer still were accounted for. "Saruman," he said slowly, "this is dangerous." "Danger lies in ignorance," Saruman replied, his gaze sharp. "This stone allows me to see beyond the walls of this tower, across leagues and borders. It shows me the movements of kings and the gathering of armies. Through it, I watch and I prepare." He gestured toward the sphere, its surface smooth as black glass, but shifting faintly, as though mist curled within its depths. "Look, Gandalf," Saruman urged softly. "See for yourself. Understand the world as it truly is, not as the elves and their fading wisdom would have you believe." Gandalf hesitated. The Palantíri were tools of great power, but also of peril. They could be used for insight, but they could also ensnare the unwary, binding their will to another's. He glanced at Saruman, whose eyes gleamed with something more than scholarly interest, something closer to hunger. But wisdom often lay in understanding one's enemies as well as one's friends. With a deep breath, Gandalf extended his hand, fingers brushing the cool surface of the Palantír. The world shifted. In an instant, the chamber of Orthanc fell away, replaced by swirling shadows and fleeting glimpses of distant lands. He saw the Anduin winding like a silver ribbon beneath the sun, the towers of Minas Tirith gleaming white against the green slopes of the Pelennor. He glimpsed the golden wood of Lothlorien, its borders shimmering like moonlight on water. But then the vision darkened. Clouds rolled across the land, swallowing sunlight, and casting long, jagged shadows. The sky turned an ominous shade of crimson, and distant fires flickered on the horizon. And there, in the heart of the darkness, rose Barad-dûr, the dark tower, wreathed in black smoke and crowned with a single, piercing eye that burned like molten gold. Gandalf recoiled, snatching his hand away from the Palantír as though burned. The vision shattered, leaving only the cold stone chamber and Saruman's expectant gaze. "You see now," Saruman said quietly. "The world changes, Gandalf. Power rises, and the age of lesser beings comes to an end. To resist is folly. To embrace strength, that is wisdom." Gandalf's heart sank. The truth, long suspected but feared, now stood revealed. Saruman had gazed too long into the dark, and the darkness had gazed back. He stepped away from the pedestal, mind racing. This was no longer the counselor of old, the leader of the White Council who once stood against the shadows. This was a man ensnared by pride and seduced by the promise of power. "You would wield the darkness to fight the darkness," Gandalf said softly, sorrow threading his voice. "But in doing so, you become what you sought to destroy." Saruman's smile returned, cold and sharp. "I seek to rule what cannot be undone. The world has no room for half measures, Gandalf. Join me, and together we can shape what comes. Or stand against me, and be swept away with the old world you cling to." The choice lay bare, and Gandalf, ever the seeker of wisdom and defender of the free peoples, knew his path. He bowed his head briefly, the weight of sorrow heavy upon him. "I will not walk the path of ruin, Saruman," he said quietly, "nor shall I stand idle while you lead others into shadow." Saruman's eyes narrowed, and the soft hum of power filled the chamber as unseen forces stirred. "Then you are a fool," Saruman murmured, "and fools must be taught wisdom." The room darkened as the first threads of binding magic curled around Gandalf's feet, silent as smoke and cold as the stone beneath them. The revelation was complete, not just of the growing darkness in the east, but of betrayal within the very heart of their defenses. And in that moment, Gandalf knew that the fight for Middle-earth would be waged not only against the shadow of Sauron, but also against those who, in seeking power, had become shadows themselves. Gandalf stood in the silent chamber of Orthanc, heart heavy with revelation. The truth of Saruman's fall into shadow was clearer now than the morning sun rising over the misty mountains. The Palantír had shown more than the eye of Barad-dûr. It had revealed the depth of Saruman's pride and the danger that lay ahead. But now was not the time for despair. With a measured breath, Gandalf turned from the cold, gleaming stone and strode toward the tall, narrow window that looked eastward toward the lands beyond. His mind was already working, piecing together fragments of knowledge, old legends, and whispered tales. Somewhere in Middle-earth's vast tapestry, answers lay waiting. He could not face this darkness alone. He would need allies, those whose wisdom had weathered countless ages, whose eyes had seen both the rise and fall of kingdoms. And so, Gandalf resolved to seek counsel from the guardians of lore, the keepers of stories long forgotten, the elves, and the free folk scattered across Middle-earth. With the first light of dawn, Gandalf departed from Orthanc, his robes billowing softly in the morning breeze. Shadowfax, the swift and noble steed gifted by the lords of Rohan, awaited him at the base of the tower, ears pricked forward as if sensing the urgency in his master's heart. "Come, my friend," Gandalf murmured, stroking the horse's silver mane. "We ride not for war, but for wisdom. Speed and silence will be our allies." They traveled swiftly across the green expanse of Eriador, the rolling hills and golden plains stretching endlessly under the soft spring sun. Birds sang in the hedgerows, and wildflowers nodded gently in the breeze. Yet even amidst such beauty, Gandalf's thoughts remained shadowed. Nights fell quietly, with the sky draped in a blanket of stars, and Gandalf often sat by the faint glow of a campfire, pipe in hand, contemplating the path ahead. Memories of old stories stirred within him, tales of ancient artifacts hidden deep within Middle-earth, relics that might hold clues to Sauron's strength and how it could be countered. And above all, one name lingered in his mind: Elrond of Rivendell. By the fifth day, the Bruinen River shimmered like liquid silver beneath the midday sun, and the hidden valley of Rivendell opened before them. The sound of cascading waterfalls filled the air, mingling with the soft melodies of elven harps drifting from unseen balconies. Elrond stood at the threshold of his house, tall and noble, his keen gaze softening as he beheld Gandalf. "Gandalf," Elrond greeted, stepping forward. "Your arrival, though welcome, speaks of dark tidings." Gandalf inclined his head. "Indeed, my friend, the shadow grows long, and Saruman no longer walks in light." They spoke deep into the evening beneath the boughs of an ancient malern tree, its golden leaves catching the moonlight. Elrond listened intently as Gandalf recounted the encounter with Saruman and the vision in the Palantír. "Then the enemy moves more swiftly than we feared," Elrond said at last, his brow furrowed. "But knowledge is our weapon as much as strength. There are stories, old, half-forgotten tales of things hidden beyond the reach of Sauron's gaze, treasures of lore locked away in places where shadow has not yet crept." Gandalf leaned forward, eyes glinting like starlight. "Tell me of these treasures, Elrond. Even the faintest whisper may guide our steps." And so Elrond spoke of the scrolls of Annuminas, ancient writings preserved from the fallen kingdom of Arnor, detailing the rings of power and their influence. He spoke of the silent watchers of Amon Sul, statues that had stood guard for centuries, rumored to hold secrets within their hollow hearts. But one tale stood above the rest, a legend whispered only among the eldest of the Eldar. "In the southern glades of Lothlorien," Elrond murmured, "there exists a hidden glade known as Acad Hithlain, the Silver Hollow. There, the Lady Galadriel guards many secrets, but one stands apart, a mirror, not of water, but of moonstone, carved in the elder days by the Noldor. It is said that this mirror does not show what is or what was, but what might yet come to pass if the will of the Valar and the Free Peoples remains unbroken." Gandalf nodded slowly. "Galadriel's wisdom is unmatched, and her sight reaches far. If this mirror can unveil the paths hidden from us, then to Lothlorien I must go. Shadowfax carried Gandalf swiftly through the narrow paths of Eregion, past the silent ruins of Ust in Adil, where once the greatest of elven smiths had labored under Celebrimbor. Each mile brought them closer to the golden woods of Lothlorien, where time itself seemed to slow, and the worries of the world dimmed beneath the canopy of Malorn leaves. The border guards of the Galadrim greeted Gandalf with quiet deference, their silver-gray cloaks blending seamlessly into the twilight shadows. He was led through winding pathways, past shimmering flets where elves watched with curious ancient eyes. Beneath the great Malorn at the heart of Caras Galadon, Galadriel awaited, her presence radiant yet soothing, like moonlight upon still water. "Gandalf," she spoke, her voice a melody of age and wisdom, "you come seeking that which lies beyond sight. But be warned, vision without purpose is a path to despair." Gandalf inclined his head. "Purpose I have, Lady of the Wood. The shadow lengthens, and I must know where it falls deepest, lest all light be extinguished." Galadriel studied him for a moment, her eyes piercing yet compassionate. Then, without a word, she gestured toward a narrow path winding down toward a moonlit hollow. The glade of Echad Hithling lay in hushed serenity, bathed in soft silver light filtering through the leaves. At its heart stood a pedestal of smooth white stone, atop which rested the moonstone mirror, an oval disk, pale as frost and luminous as moonlight on fresh snow. Gandalf approached, feeling the ancient power the thrumming gently beneath his fingertips as he touched the mirror's cool surface. The reflection shimmered, then shifted, revealing not his face, but swirling images that slowly resolved into clarity. First, he saw Minas Tirith, proud and gleaming in the morning sun. But as the vision lingered, shadows crept up its walls, banners of Buak unfurling from the highest towers. Then came the image of a forest, Mirkwood, dark and oppressive, its trees twisted and gnarled. Within the shadows, countless eyes glimmered, watching, waiting. Finally, the vision settled upon Mount Doom, its peak wreathed in smoke and flame. But there, at the mountain's base, stood a lone figure clad in white, Saruman, his staff raised, speaking to a dark-robed emissary, whose face remained obscured by shadow. The image flickered, then faded, leaving Gandalf standing in silence, heart heavy with newfound knowledge. Galadriel's voice, soft yet resolute, broke the stillness. "What you have seen is but one path, Gandalf. The future remains ever in motion, shaped by choices made and unmade." Gandalf turned, eyes steady. "Yet one truth remains clear. Saruman no longer seeks to resist the shadow. He seeks to master it." Galadriel nodded, her expression grave. "Then the time for counsels and whispers ends. Action must be taken, swift and sure. But tread carefully, Mithrandir, for even the brightest light can cast the deepest shadow if turned against itself." With the dawn, Gandalf took his leave of Lothlorien, heart buoyed by clarity but burdened with urgency. He knew now that Saruman's betrayal was not idle folly, but a calculated bid for dominion. The White Council must be warned, and the scattered free folk roused to vigilance. Yet, even as Shadowfax carried him northward, Gandalf's thoughts turned to another ally, Radagast the Brown, the gentle wizard who dwelled near the eaves of Mirkwood. Though often dismissed as whimsical and aloof, Radagast's bond with the wild creatures of Middle-earth gave him an insight where others saw only wilderness. Thus, the next leg of Gandalf's journey took him to Rosgobel, Radagast's humble abode nestled among ancient oaks. Birds flitted overhead, and soft chattering filled the air as Gandalf approached the moss-covered gate. Radagast, clad in earth-toned robes and crowned with leaves tangled in his wild hair, greeted Gandalf with a bemused smile. "Gandalf," he exclaimed, brushing aside a curious squirrel perched on his shoulder, "you arrive with the wind at your back and worry in your eyes. What troubles you, old friend?" Gandalf wasted no time recounting the revelations of the Moonstone Mirror and Saruman's descent into treachery. Radagast's expression grew somber, his usual light-heartedness dimming like the sun behind storm clouds. "Darkness grows indeed," Radagast murmured, brow furrowed. "Even the birds speak of restless nights, and silent glades where once song never ceased. If Saruman allies with the shadow, the wild places will suffer first." Gandalf nodded. "We must act swiftly, Radagast. Rally the free folk, the Beornings, the woodmen of Mirkwood, even the scattered wanderers of Eriador. Let them know that vigilance, not fear, is our greatest defense." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the forest floor, Gandalf stood beside Shadowfax once more, gaze fixed eastward. The journey had deepened his understanding, unveiling truths both harrowing and empowering. Saruman's path was set, but Middle-earth's fate remained unwritten. With the allies beside him and the light of ancient wisdom to guide the way, Gandalf knew the struggle ahead would be fierce, but not without hope. Drawing his cloak tighter against the evening breeze, he whispered to Shadowfax, "Come, my friend, there is much to do, and the night grows old." With a final glance toward the fading light, Gandalf urged his steed forward, disappearing into the twilight shadows, bound for the next chapter in the unfolding struggle for Middle-earth's future. Gandalf rode through the moonlit forest, with Shadowfax's hooves barely touching the mossy earth. The revelations from Lothlorien weighed heavily upon him, each vision from the Moonstone Mirror sharpening his resolve. Saruman's ambition was no longer veiled in secrecy. The White Wizard sought dominion, not resistance. But knowledge, Gandalf mused, was only as powerful as the actions it inspired. He had seen the path ahead, but choices still lay before him, like forks in an ancient woodland trail. He would need more than wisdom. He would need allies, courage, and the quiet strength found in the hearts of Middle-earth's free folk. The air grew colder as Gandalf and Shadowfax passed the eaves of Fangorn Forest, the ancient trees murmuring softly in the night breeze. Gandalf paused at the edge, hand resting against the gnarled bark of an old beech. "Even the trees whisper of unrest," he murmured. "The shadow creeps further than we dared imagine." Shadowfax snorted softly, as if in agreement, and Gandalf pressed onward, heading east toward Rohan and the lands beyond. His path would lead him first to the Tower Hills, where the remnants of Arnor's watch still lingered, and then toward Isengard, where the final confrontation awaited. As dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and lavender, Gandalf reached the windswept plains near the Gap of Rohan. There, standing like silent guardians, were the watchstones of Elendil, ancient markers of a kingdom long fallen. He dismounted and stood before the weathered monoliths, fingertips brushing against the runes carved by hands long gone. In the hush of morning, a soft rustling announced another's arrival. From the eastern slope, a figure clad in brown robes emerged, hair tangled with twigs and leaves. Radagast the Brown, Gandalf's fellow Istari, greeted him with a smile, though his eyes held a shadow of concern. "Gandalf," Radagast called, extending his arms. "The birds spoke of your journey. The forest is restless. What news do you bring?" Gandalf clasped Radagast's arm warmly. "Dark tidings, my friend. Saruman has fallen to pride and ambition. He no longer seeks to resist the shadow, but to wield it." Radagast's expression darkened. The animals sense it too. Wolves move in packs, where once they hunted alone. Even the eagles grow wary. Gandalf nodded, eyes narrowing toward the distant peaks of Isengard. "We must act swiftly. I ride to confront Saruman. Will you rouse the wild folk? Let them know the time for vigilance has come." Radagast bowed his head. "I will send word through root and wing. But take care, Gandalf. Saruman's cunning is matched only by his desperation." With a final clasp of hands, the two wizards parted, Radagast disappearing into the underbrush, while Gandalf urged Shadowfax onward toward the stone spires of Isengard. The sun was high when Gandalf reached the outer ring of Isengard, once a place of wisdom and peace, now transformed into a fortress of industry and control. Smoke curled from hidden furnaces, and the trees that once stood proud along the outer walls had been felled, their stumps standing like tombstones. Shadowfax halted near the gates, ears flicking nervously. Gandalf dismounted, staff in hand, and called out, voice steady yet firm. "Saruman, I know your treachery. The time for pretense is past. Come forth and speak plainly, if any wisdom remains in you." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the distant clang of metal on metal. Then, high above, a figure appeared upon the balcony of Orthanc. Saruman, clad not in white but in robes of shifting hues, like light fractured through glass. "So, you return, Gandalf," Saruman's voice rang out, smooth and cold. "Did you find what you sought in Lothlorien? Did the lady fill your head with dreams and shadows?" Gandalf stepped forward, gaze unwavering. "I found clarity, Saruman, and truth. You seek power, not peace. You would wield the weapon of the enemy, believing yourself strong enough to master it." Saruman laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. "Strength is all that matters, old friend. The world does not bow to wisdom, but to power. Align with me, and we shall reshape Middle-earth, not as slaves to Sauron, but as rulers in our own right." Gandalf's eyes hardened. "You deceive yourself. The path you tread leads only to ruin. I will not stand aside while you barter Middle-earth's freedom for fleeting dominion." Saruman's expression twisted with anger, he raised his hand, and from the depths of Orthanc, dark shapes emerged, Uruk-hai, creatures bred for strength and obedience, their eyes gleaming with cruel intent. But Gandalf stood firm, staff glowing softly at its tip. "You cannot win this battle, Saruman. Even now, the free folk gather, the light endures, despite your betrayal." Saruman sneered, "Light fades, Gandalf, shadows lengthen." Before Saruman could speak another word, the ground trembled beneath their feet, a deep, rumbling vibration that sent loose stones skittering down the slopes of Orthanc. From the edge of Fangorn Forest, ancient shapes emerged, Ents, the shepherds of the trees, their bark-like faces stern with purpose. Treebeard, oldest of the Ents, raised a mighty limb and called out in a voice like wind through hollow trunks, "Saruman, betrayer of leaf and branch, your reckoning comes. You have hewn the forest, and the forest now rises against you." Saruman's eyes widened in disbelief as the Ents advanced, roots tearing through stone, branches breaking iron like brittle twigs. The Uruk-hai, fierce as they were, faltered beneath the onslaught of living wood. Gandalf, standing amidst the chaos, lifted his staff high. "This is the end of your dominion, Saruman. Your tower remains, but your power crumbles." Desperate, Saruman turned back toward the balcony, hand reaching for the Palantír that still rested upon its pedestal. But even as his fingers brushed the smooth surface, Gandalf spoke a word of command, and the stone flared with blinding light. Saruman staggered backward, eyes burning with fury and fear. "You cannot hold me, Gandalf. I am Saruman the Wise." Gandalf's voice, calm and resolute, cut through the clamor. "You were wise once, Saruman. Now you are but a servant of your own pride." With a final, shuddering cry, Saruman stumbled, robes billowing as he retreated into the shadowy depths of Orthanc. The Ents, having breached the outer defenses, now surrounded the tower, their deep voices murmuring like thunder among the hills. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate ring of Isengard, Gandalf stood amidst the wreckage, heart heavy but resolute. Victory had come, but not without cost. The peace once held within these walls lay shattered, and the scars upon the land would not soon heal. Treebeard, stepping carefully among the fallen stones, bowed his massive head toward Gandalf. "The forest mourns, Mithrandir, but life endures. The roots will reclaim what was lost, given time and care." Gandalf nodded, placing a hand upon the Ent's weathered bark. "Indeed, old friend. Renewal follows ruin, but vigilance must not waver. Saruman's power is broken, but the shadow he served yet lingers." From the corner of his eye, Gandalf saw a glimmer upon the ground, the Palantír, half buried in rubble, its dark surface swirling with faint light. He stooped, wrapping it carefully in a fold of his cloak. "This," he murmured, "shall not fall into unworthy hands again." Turning toward the gathered Ents and the few free folk who had joined the fray, Gandalf raised his staff. "The battle here is won, but the greater war endures. We must stand united, not as rulers or conquerors, but as keepers of peace and guardians of light." The Ents rumbled in agreement, while Radagast, having returned with news from the wildlands, nodded thoughtfully. The creatures of the forest stir with hope, Gandalf. Word will spread swiftly. As dawn brought over the misty mountains, Gandalf mounted Shadowfax once more, the Palantír safely stowed within his saddlebag. The road ahead was long, but his purpose was clear: to warn the White Council, rally the Free Peoples, and ensure that the light of Middle-earth did not falter beneath the growing shadow. He paused at the edge of the ruined gates of Isengard, casting one final glance toward Orthanc. High above, Saruman stood silent upon the balcony, a diminished figure against the rising sun. Pride had led him to this fall, and though his tower remained, his influence had waned. With a sigh, both weary and resolute, Gandalf urged Shadowfax forward. The morning breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the plains of Rohan, mingling with the faintest hint of wood smoke from distant hearth fires. Life, despite all trials, endured, and so the wizard rode on, not in triumph, but in quiet determination, a lone figure upon the winding road, carrying both the burdens of knowledge and the promise of hope. For in Middle-earth, as in all places touched by shadow, it was not strength, but steadfastness that turned the tide. And Gandalf, bearer of light and wisdom, would see that hope endured. The first light of dawn touched the high peaks of the misty mountains as Gandalf rode eastward, the soft clatter of Shadowfax's hooves muffled by the dew-laden grass. Behind him, Isengard lay quiet, its once proud towers now shadowed by regret and ruin. Yet, within the stillness, there was peace, a peace hard-won but steadfast, like the roots of ancient trees that weather every storm. Gandalf paused at the crest of a gentle hill, gazing back toward the distant silhouette of Orthanc. The tower stood stark against the pale sky, no longer a beacon of wisdom, but a silent reminder of ambition turned astray. In the folds of his cloak, the Palantír lay wrapped and secure, its dark glass now dim and powerless without Saruman's will to guide it. The air, cool and fragrant with the scent of pine and wildflowers, stirred around him as though Middle-earth itself sighed in quiet relief. From the far edge of Fangorn Forest, a soft, deep murmur rose, the ancient voices of the Ents, resuming their timeless vigil. Turning eastward once more, Gandalf urged Shadowfax into an easy trot, the great horse moving with the grace of a flowing stream. Their path would lead first through the golden plains of Rohan, then northward along the greenway toward Bree, and finally back to Rivendell, where Elrond awaited news of Saruman's fall. But for now, the road was quiet, stretching like a silver ribbon beneath the soft morning light. Birds flitted from branch to branch, their gentle songs weaving through the hush of dawn. The world, Gandalf mused, seemed to breathe once more, unburdened by the weight of treachery. As they passed through a glade where wildflowers bloomed in delicate clusters, Gandalf slowed, allowing the tranquility of the moment to settle around him. He reached down, brushing his fingers against the petals of a star-shaped blossom, its pale blue hue reminiscent of the skies above the gray havens. Even after shadow, he murmured, life finds its way. By evening, Gandalf had reached the western edge of Rohan, where the grasslands rolled like soft waves toward the horizon. He made camp beneath the sheltering boughs of an ancient oak, its leaves whispering secrets of ages past. As the first stars pricked the velvet sky, Gandalf lit a small fire, its glow casting gentle shadows upon the earth. He sat beside it, pipe in hand, the faint tendrils of smoke curling upward like dreams escaping into the night. He reflected upon the journey, the warnings in Lothlorien, the gathering of allies, the confrontation with Saruman. Each moment, though fraught with peril, had been guided by purpose, and within that purpose there had been clarity, like light breaking through mist. Even the wise may falter, Gandalf thought, recalling the bitterness in Saruman's voice, but it is the will to rise, to choose light despite the allure of power, that defines true strength. Shadowfax, standing nearby with head lowered, flicked his ears at the soft murmur of Gandalf's thoughts. The wizard smiled, reaching out to stroke the horse's mane. As the fire dwindled to embers, Gandalf lay back upon his cloak, gazing upward at the star-speckled sky. The constellations, ancient and unchanging, spun their quiet dance overhead, silent witnesses to the triumphs and trials of Middle-earth. His thoughts drifted toward Rivendell, where the wisdom of Elrond would weigh heavily upon the tidings he brought. Beyond Rivendell lay the Shire, peaceful, untouched by the greater struggles of the world. He imagined the soft glow of hearth fires in Hobbiton, the gentle laughter drifting from the windows of the Green Dragon, the quiet rustle of leaves along Bag End's winding path. One must fight for such peace, Gandalf mused, not with sword and shield alone, but with wisdom, vigilance, and the quiet courage found in the hearts of those who cherish the simple joys of life. The Palantír, now a cold and silent relic, would be delivered to Elrond's safekeeping. It would no longer tempt the hearts of the proud or whisper false promises to the unwary. Knowledge, Gandalf knew, was a gift best tempered with humility. The night deepened, and the fire's last ember flickered and died. Gandalf pulled his cloak closer, the warmth of the earth beneath him soothing and familiar. Above, the moon sailed quietly across the sky, casting silver light upon the peaceful land. He closed his eyes, breath slowing as the soft lull of night enfolded him. In the stillness, he felt not weariness but fulfillment, a sense that, though the road continued and challenges yet lay ahead, the heart of Middle-earth beat, strong and true. For those who listened to the land, who cherished its quiet moments and stood firm against the rising dark, peace would endure, and in that peace, dreams would unfold like petals beneath the sun. "Sleep now," Gandalf murmured softly, as though speaking to the very earth itself. "Tomorrow will dawn fair and bright." The stars, ever watchful, shimmered in silent agreement, and Middle-earth, cradled in tranquility, drifted into slumber once more.